So I attended a concert at the park this past summer, and I greeted my friend Rich, only to realize his name was Jeff. He was a fiance of a friend. I had known him for many years. My dear wife corrected me within seconds. However, it was too late. The damage had been done. I apologized to him profusely. I was both mad and embarrassed of myself. I questioned how I possibly could have called him by the wrong name. And I wondered what others thought about my awkward mistake. I was stuck with one negative thought after another, and I found myself ruminating the rest of the night and into the next morning. I thought about this way too much than I should have. So what is rumination? Rumination is a process by which we repeatedly think about a situation and or problem without reaching a solution, thinking we can gain insight by continually thinking about it. It's similar to a cow chewing its cud over and over. And while we all need the tools to combat runaway rumination, ultimately it's about finding and embracing a more compassionate and a way of accepting ourselves. There's one extreme form of rumination that I experienced as a result of my OCD diagnosis. I remember it vividly. It was 2001, and I had gone out for a run. Come back, I was drinking some water, wiping the sweat from my eyes and blinking to let the moisture settle, when instantly I was struck by this innocuous thought. My eyes blinking. Normally these kind of thoughts would retreat into the abyss of our mind where they'd reach their demise. However, this one remained. Seconds turned into minutes. Minutes turned into hours. Anxiety erupted into panic. I couldn't think of anything else but my blinking. The more I tried not to thinking about it, the worse it got. This relentless questioning and overthinking is characteristic of a condition known as hyperawareness OCD. It's where normal bodily sensation transform into sources of intense and unwanted concern and obsession. It traps people into a cycle of anxiety and panic and leads to prolonged suffering. And while my experience is most likely not something that's happened to you, we all have the same problem. We all ruminate, and that rumination can be harmful to us. So what I learned through my condition, as well as my experience as a therapist, is that we all need to learn to accept that the key to calming our mind and living our best life is accepting thoughts instead of resisting them. To better regulate our lives, we need to differentiate between awareness and acceptance, allowing thoughts to exist without responding, and acknowledging them as just thoughts. So let's face it, in today's society, there are plenty of sources of worry and rumination. Let's face it, with financial worries, work pressures, social media, we're all kept in this constant state of alert. Many of us have experienced trauma, which rewires our brain to a continual state of hypervigilance. According to SAMHSA, 2/3 of children reported experiencing at least one traumatic event by the time they turned 16. Many of us suffer from anxiety disorders, which keeps us in a state of fight or flight. To compound the problem, 36% of adults struggle with knowing where to start when dealing with their stress. And 50% of those who are mentally ill do not receive treatment. So when I began my journey to find answers, my symptoms weren't recognized as OCD. I remember being called a rainbow of phobias. I'm not even sure what that means, to be honest with you. I was told my case was very confusing. When I discovered it was OCD, I tried therapy. However, it ended in frustration as it didn't work for me. This started a cycle that went off and on for many years. I became desperate. I became so desperate, I put an ad in the local newspaper. I know I'm dating myself. I was looking for others that suffered from anxiety. I purposely didn't use the term OCD in the ad. It was a bit too vulnerable for me at the time. But lo and behold, someone actually answered my ad. He's now a dear friend. Came to find out he was a longtime sufferer, and he was seeing a therapist who specialized in OCD and was receiving tremendous results. So I took a chance. I met with the therapist. Come to find out, my subtype of OCD has a couple names: hyperawareness, somatic, sensory motor OCD. Has no cure, except there's very effective treatment. I also came to find out that my attempts to not think about my blinking, as well as trying to distract myself from my thoughts, was not effective. Let me explain. There are two keys to solving unwanted rumination. First, don't try to solve the problem presented in the rumination. Okay? Don't. Second, don't give the rumination attention. This will allow it to dissipate from your awareness. So let me explain. Attention and awareness are often used interchangeably, which leads to confusion. It's impossible to keep a thought out of awareness. But if we learn not to give the thought attention, it will go away. In other words, if we want something out of our scope of awareness, we cannot force it to leave. We must accept our thoughts, which is crucial to learning the subtle distinction between attention and awareness. Equally important to eradicating unwanted thoughts is not necessarily eradicating them, but finding a new way to relate to them. Again, it's about finding and accepting a more compassionate and accepting way of relating to ourselves. So when I was in therapy, my therapist and I developed a mantra. And I still use it to this day when my OCD shadows begin to appear. And they do on occasion. I tell myself, self, I'm just a guy that thinks about his blinking. So let me repeat that in case you missed that. I'm just a guy that thinks about his blinking. While that may seem simple, it sums up what I denied for years. By allowing ourselves to think up a simple go-to phrase, we can remind ourselves who we are, where we've come from, serves as a tool to help center our thoughts, bring us back to the here and now. And I also use it to provide levity and simplicity to my condition. What I also discovered was that my refusal to discuss my struggles was a major factor in the time it took me to get well. You see, I was terrified of being labeled. And I used this fear to stop me from getting the help I so desperately needed. So what did I do? I attended therapy. I practiced consistently for the most part. My thoughts began to lose their power. I began to slowly get my life back. In fact, the change was so profound that I left my 25-year career and became a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety. So I owe my progress, this daily grind of, imagine having blinking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I owe that progress of feeling better to the example of tenacity and determination that was passed on to me from my father. There was a time when I resented him, however, because I felt I didn't meet his expectations and that we had an inability, we just couldn't communicate. What I didn't understand, these were symptoms we kept in a box. It was a secret box that we kept hidden away at home. You see, my mother suffered from a mental illness, specifically an undiagnosed personality disorder. And to the outside, she was seen as eccentric. But to the inside, we would stuff her erratic behaviors inside this secret box. As a result, my dad became everything. He became her caregiver, he became her therapist, and what he had left, he gave to my sisters and myself, in addition to working a very demanding job. Tragically, my mother passed away in 2012. It was at that time my father and I decided it was time to open this box. We did it together. My dad explained that he had made a vow a long time ago that he would always keep our family together no matter what. However, he couldn't understand why he could never make my mom happy. That emptied part of the contents of that box. I processed what he said, which emptied the rest of the box, and I explained to him mental illness and how it manifested in our family. This process helped both my father and myself to heal. My dad no longer blamed himself for my mother's unhappiness, and I finally began to understand my father. So my call to action to everyone in here is pretty simple. Don't keep your feelings or your thoughts to yourself. Find somebody that will listen to you unconditionally. Okay? Second, I mentioned earlier, don't try to solve those problems that are presented in your rumination. Finally, allow thoughts to exist without resisting them, remembering that if we don't pay attention to them, they will lose their power. Okay? So, while this was crucial to treating my OCD, it can relate to anybody, including my buddy Jeff.